Have you ever had a strange feeling deep inside your heart that someone is already walking toward you right now even though you haven't met them yet? That somewhere in this very moment God is preparing someone whose story is about to collide with yours in a way you never expected? Because what if I told you that your future spouse is not far away, not lost somewhere across the world, not delayed by accident or forgotten by heaven, but actually closer than you think and already moving step by step according to God's perfect timing, even while you are still wondering why things feel slow, confusing, or quiet in your life right now? And the reason this message is reaching you today is because God wants you to stop believing the lie that your love story is late and start understanding the truth that He has been arranging something behind the scenes that your eyes cannot yet see but your spirit has already started to sense. Because there is a powerful reason why certain people left your life unexpectedly. There is a reason why some relationships never worked no matter how hard you tried. There is a reason why doors closed that you begged God to keep open, and it is not because you were unworthy of love but because God was protecting the space where the right person would eventually arrive at the exact moment your heart was ready to recognize them. And right now, while you are waiting and wondering and sometimes even doubting if that person really exists, God is aligning conversations you have not heard yet, places you have not visited yet, moments you cannot imagine yet, and paths you cannot predict yet, so that when the time finally comes you will look back and realize that nothing about your journey was random but everything was preparation for the connection He already promised to bring into your life. Because your future spouse is not just someone you will meet by coincidence but someone whose arrival will make sense of your past pain, someone whose presence will feel like peace instead of confusion, someone whose words will strengthen your faith instead of weakening your confidence, someone whose timing will match the season God is building inside you right now even if you cannot see the progress yet. And the truth many people never realize is that before God connects two people He first prepares them separately so they can recognize each other clearly when the moment finally comes. Which means while you have been growing stronger through disappointment, learning patience through silence, and developing wisdom through experiences that once felt like setbacks, God has been shaping another heart somewhere else through their own lessons and their own waiting so that both of you arrive at the same moment ready instead of rushing into something unprepared. Because God does not write rushed love stories, He writes aligned love stories, and alignment takes time even when your emotions want answers immediately, and sometimes what feels like delay is actually divine positioning, because if certain meetings had happened earlier you would not have been ready to receive what God was sending into your life, and if certain people had stayed longer they would have blocked the space meant for someone who is actually assigned to walk beside you instead of simply passing through your life temporarily. And that is why today you must understand that the waiting season you are experiencing is not empty but active, not silent but intentional, not forgotten but carefully guided by a God who sees the entire timeline of your story even when you can only see the present chapter you are standing inside right now. Because your future spouse is not searching randomly either but being guided step by step, just like you are being guided step by step. And sometimes two people can be very close to meeting each other without even realizing it yet, because God is arranging the exact intersection where your paths will finally connect in a way that feels natural instead of forced, and peaceful instead of confusing, and when that moment comes you will understand why the connections that looked promising before suddenly faded away, and why the conversations that seemed important before suddenly stopped, and why the people you once thought were permanent turned out to be temporary, because they were never meant to stay long enough to interfere with the person God was preparing specifically for you. And there is something powerful happening right now that many people miss during their waiting season, which is the quiet transformation inside their heart where God removes fear, removes insecurity, removes the pressure to force relationships that are not meant for them, so that when the right person finally appears they are able to recognize peace instead of chasing excitement that leads nowhere. Because excitement fades quickly but peace lasts, and the person God is preparing for you will bring clarity instead of confusion, and consistency instead of uncertainty, and respect instead of emotional guessing games that leave you questioning your worth. And maybe you have been wondering recently why your standards have changed, or why certain conversations no longer feel right, or why your heart suddenly feels unwilling to settle for connections that once seemed acceptable before. And the reason is not because something is wrong with you, but because something is changing inside you as preparation for someone whose presence will match the level God is raising you to right now. Because when God begins aligning two people, He also begins adjusting their expectations so they can recognize each other clearly without being distracted by relationships that only look right on the surface but are not right in purpose. And that is why you should never interpret your waiting season as rejection, because waiting with God is always preparation, not punishment, and positioning, not delay. And the truth is that somewhere closer than you realize there is a person who is also learning lessons they did not expect to learn, healing wounds they did not expect to face, growing stronger through challenges they did not choose, and every step of that process is bringing them closer to the exact version of themselves they need to become before they meet you. Because God does not connect people randomly, He connects people intentionally at the moment their purpose can grow together instead of pulling each other backward. And right now, even though your timeline feels uncertain, Heaven's timeline is moving perfectly, and what you cannot see today will make complete sense soon enough if you continue trusting God instead of trusting the fear that tries to convince you nothing is happening. Because something is happening even in the silence, and something is moving even when you cannot see progress, and someone is coming even if their footsteps have not reached your door yet. And the strongest sign that your future spouse is closer than you think is not a sudden announcement or dramatic signal, but the quiet shift happening inside your spirit, where you are beginning to feel less desperate for answers and more confident in God's timing. Because when trust replaces anxiety, it usually means alignment is already getting closer than you realize, and heaven is preparing a moment that will arrive exactly when your heart is ready to recognize it. There are moments in your life right now that may feel ordinary on the surface, but heaven is quietly arranging them with extraordinary precision, because the God who created your heart already knows the exact heart that will understand it without explanation. And while you may be wondering why certain relationships never stayed, why certain conversations ended strangely, why certain connections suddenly faded without closure, the truth is not that you were rejected, the truth is that you were protected, because the person God has chosen for you cannot arrive while confusion is still occupying the space meant for clarity, and they cannot recognize your value if your attention is still tied to people who never saw your worth in the first place. And that is why the distance you experienced was not loss, it was alignment, not punishment, but positioning, not silence, but preparation, because God is not delaying your future spouse, He is designing the exact moment your lives will intersect in a way that neither of you will be able to deny, and when that moment comes, something inside your spirit will recognize peace before your mind even understands what is happening, and that peace will feel different from every connection you have ever experienced before, because it will not come with anxiety, it will not come with confusion, it will not come with guessing games, it will come with clarity, stability, and a quiet confidence that says, "This is the person God prepared for me even before I knew how to pray for them." And what makes this even more powerful is that while you have been growing through seasons you did not fully understand, your future spouse has been growing too, learning lessons they never expected, facing challenges they never asked for, and becoming the version of themselves that will be strong enough to stand beside you without competing with you, without controlling you, and without misunderstanding your calling, because God never brings two destinies together randomly. He brings them together intentionally, and if you could see what He has been doing behind the scenes right now, you would realize that the timing you once questioned is actually the timing that will protect your future happiness in ways you cannot yet see. And that is why some doors had to close quietly and some people had to leave without explanation, because their exit created space for someone whose entrance will change everything, and you might not feel it every day, but there is a divine movement happening in your life that is guiding your steps closer and closer to the moment you will finally meet the person who understands why you waited, who understands why you stayed faithful when it was easier to settle, and who understands why you refused to give your heart to situations that never carried peace, because God sees your patience even when nobody else noticed it, and He honors the way you chose purpose over pressure and faith over fear. And that honor is not invisible, it is preparing a connection that will not just feel emotional but will feel spiritual, intentional, and secure. And there is something very important happening right now that you may not realize, which is that God is shaping your expectations so that when the right person arrives you will recognize them not by excitement alone but by alignment, because excitement fades quickly but alignment lasts through seasons, challenges, growth, and change. And the person who is coming into your life is not meant to impress you for a moment, they are meant to walk beside you for a lifetime. And that is why God is removing distractions that once looked like opportunities, because He knows your future requires clarity, not confusion, peace, not pressure, and commitment, not temporary attention. And even though you may still be wondering when this connection will appear, the truth is that heaven has already scheduled an encounter that will make your past delays make sense in a way that will surprise you, because the same God who protected your heart yesterday is guiding your steps today and preparing your tomorrow with a precision you cannot see but you can trust. And the reason this message is reaching you right now is not coincidence, because sometimes God reminds you that the story you thought was slowing down is actually moving forward in ways your eyes cannot yet measure. And if you stay faithful in this season, if you stay patient in this preparation, if you stay open to His direction instead of rushing your own plans, you will soon notice something changing inside you, a new confidence, a new calmness, a new expectation that begins to replace uncertainty. And that shift is often the sign that alignment is getting closer than you think, because before God changes your relationship status, He often changes your spiritual readiness. And when readiness meets timing, destiny begins to move quickly, and suddenly what once felt far away starts feeling possible, what once felt uncertain starts feeling clear, and what once felt delayed starts revealing itself as perfectly timed, and the connection that is coming toward your life is not arriving by accident, it is arriving by design, and when it finally appears you will not need to chase it, force it, or question it, because what God sends into your life will carry confirmation, not confusion, peace not pressure, and purpose not distraction, and the moment that connection begins to unfold you will understand why every closed door, every unexpected ending, every silent season, and every unanswered question was actually guiding you step by step towards someone who was being prepared just as carefully as you were being prepared. And when two prepared hearts finally meet at the right time under the direction of God, something powerful begins to grow, something steady, something lasting, something that reflects not just attraction but intention, and that intention is the reason you were never meant to settle early, because what God is building for you is meant to last longer than a moment, longer than a season, and longer than the doubts that once made you question whether your waiting would ever make sense. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, because God often moves the biggest blessings closer to you in silence before He reveals them in clarity, and what feels like waiting is actually positioning. What feels like loneliness is actually preparation, and what feels like delay is actually divine protection. Because if the right person had entered your life too early, they would have met a version of you that was still healing instead of the version of you that is now becoming stronger, wiser, calmer, and spiritually aligned with the future God already designed for you long before you ever prayed for it. And this is why the season you are walking through today is not empty but sacred, not random but intentional, not forgotten but carefully arranged by a God who never loses track of the details of your story, even when the world around you feels confusing and uncertain. There are moments when you wonder why certain conversations stopped, why certain people slowly disappeared from your life without explanation, why some connections that once felt promising suddenly became quiet and distant, but what you did not realize at the time was that heaven was protecting the space around your heart so the wrong voices would not stay long enough to confuse the direction of your destiny. Because the person God is preparing for you is not meant to arrive into chaos but into clarity, not into insecurity but into confidence, not into fear but into faith, and every step you take right now is moving you closer to someone who will recognize your worth without needing to be convinced of it. Sometimes the closest blessings are the ones we overlook because we expect something dramatic while God works through something gentle. We expect something loud while God moves through something quiet. We expect something distant while God places something near. And what if the reason you keep feeling that strange sense of anticipation in your spirit lately is because your future spouse is already walking through their own season of preparation at the same time as you, learning lessons that will make them ready for you just as you are becoming ready for them, because divine timing is not only about when you meet someone but about who both of you are becoming before that moment happens. You may not realize this yet, but there are prayers you whispered months ago that are already being answered in ways you cannot see. There are doors closing right now that are clearing the path for the one door that truly matters, and there are moments of silence in your life that are not signs of absence but signs of alignment. Because God never removes something without replacing it with something better that fits your purpose more perfectly than anything you tried to hold on to before. Think about how different your mindset is today compared to who you were a year ago. Think about the strength you carry now that you did not have before. Think about the boundaries you learned to protect, the clarity you gained about what you truly deserve, the courage you discovered inside yourself when you thought you would never recover from certain disappointments. All of that growth was not accidental but necessary because the person God is sending into your life is meant to meet the version of you that knows their value and trusts their purpose instead of the version of you that once settled for less than what heaven planned for you. There is a reason your heart has been learning patience even when patience felt uncomfortable. There is a reason your faith has been growing stronger even when answers felt delayed, and there is a reason you keep feeling that quiet sense that something meaningful is approaching even though nothing obvious has happened yet. Because sometimes God lets you feel the promise before you see the proof so your faith can prepare a place for the miracle before the miracle appears in front of you. And what many people do not understand is that divine relationships are not built through coincidence but through alignment, not through pressure but through peace, not through confusion but through clarity that feels different from anything you experienced before, because when the right person begins stepping into your life you will not have to chase their attention, you will not have to question their intentions. And you will not have to shrink yourself to keep them close, instead you will recognize something familiar in their presence that feels like confirmation rather than uncertainty. Right now there are details being arranged that you cannot control but you can trust, conversations being prepared that have not happened yet but will change everything when they do. Paths being redirected that seem inconvenient today but will make perfect sense later, because sometimes the greatest sign that your future spouse is getting closer is not what is entering your life but what is quietly leaving it, making space for something real, something lasting, something designed specifically for you. You are not waiting alone even if it feels that way sometimes, because the same God who is shaping your story is shaping someone else's story to intersect with yours at the exact moment when both of your journeys are ready to connect without fear, without confusion, and without the pain that once made relationships feel uncertain in your past. And when that moment finally happens, you will realize that every delay had a purpose and every disappointment had a lesson that protected your heart, until the right person was close enough to find you. So if your heart has been feeling restless lately, if your spirit has been sensing change even though your surroundings still look the same, if you keep feeling that quiet expectation you cannot explain, it may be because something beautiful is moving closer step by step even now, guided by a timing greater than anything you could plan yourself. And the very thing you once thought was far away may already be closer than you think right now. There are moments in your life when you begin to wonder why certain doors stayed closed even after you knocked with faith, why certain people slowly disappeared even though you prayed for them to stay, and why the timeline you imagined for love never matched the calendar God seemed to be following. But what you could not see then is becoming clearer now because heaven never delays something that is meant for your destiny. It only protects it until the right season arrives, and the truth is the person God is preparing for you is not simply someone who will make you feel loved for a moment but someone who will stand with you in purpose, someone who will recognize your calling without being threatened by it, someone who will not compete with your growth but will grow beside you, and that kind of connection cannot be rushed because God does not build covenant relationships the way the world builds temporary attachments. He builds them carefully, quietly, intentionally, shaping both hearts separately before allowing them to recognize each other. And this is why the waiting season has felt longer than expected, because while you were asking God to send the right person quickly, He was preparing both of you deeply, strengthening your patience, healing wounds you did not even realize were still influencing your choices, removing patterns that once attracted the wrong kind of connection. and teaching you how to recognize peace instead of confusion when the right relationship finally appears in your life. And what feels like silence right now is actually preparation happening behind the scenes, because God never brings someone into your life to complete your loneliness. He brings someone into your life to multiply your purpose, and that multiplication requires alignment, spiritual maturity, emotional readiness, and divine timing working together at the same moment. Which is why every delay you experienced was never punishment but protection, never rejection but redirection, never abandonment but positioning, because the love God is preparing for you is not fragile, it is not temporary, and it is not based on chance. It is designed to support your future and strengthen your faith journey in ways you cannot fully imagine yet. And even though there were nights when you questioned whether your prayers were being heard and mornings when you wondered if your story would ever change, heaven was already moving pieces into place long before you could see any evidence of progress. And what you are about to step into is not something ordinary but something intentional, something steady, something peaceful in a way that feels different from everything you have experienced before. Because when God sends the right person into your life, there will be clarity instead of confusion, security instead of anxiety, alignment instead of struggle, and a deep sense in your spirit that you are finally walking into something that was written for you long before you even knew how to pray for it. And this is why you must not lose hope now, not when you are closer than you realize, not when the season is shifting quietly in your favor, not when the preparation you have been walking through is about to become the foundation for the relationship you once thought would never arrive but is already moving toward you step by step under God's perfect timing. There is something happening in your life right now that you may not fully understand yet, because what feels like delay is actually divine positioning. What feels like silence is actually preparation, and what feels like distance between you and the person you are praying for is not separation but alignment, because God never sends someone important into your life randomly. He prepares both hearts separately before He connects them together, and if you look honestly at the season you are walking through right now, you will notice that you are changing in ways you did not plan. Your standards are rising, your patience is growing, your faith is becoming stronger than your fear, and even the way you see relationships is becoming clearer. And this is not happening by accident. This is happening because the version of you that existed before could not have sustained the blessing that is coming. So God is strengthening your spirit first before He places the right person beside you. And sometimes this preparation feels lonely because growth often happens in quiet places where nobody else can see what God is building inside you. But that loneliness is not punishment, it is protection. It is God removing distractions that would have delayed your destiny. It is God teaching your heart how to recognize peace instead of confusion when the right person finally appears. Because when the connection He is preparing arrives, it will not feel like chaos, it will not feel like uncertainty, it will not feel like emotional exhaustion, it will feel steady, calm, safe, and deeply familiar, as if your spirit already knew them before your eyes ever saw them. And what many people do not realize is that divine relationships rarely begin with noise. They begin with recognition. They begin with a quiet certainty inside your heart that says, this is different. This is not like before. This is not temporary. This is something God Himself arranged long before today, and even now. While you are waiting, there are unseen changes happening in the life of the person who is meant for you. God is shaping their mindset, healing their past wounds, redirecting their steps, and moving circumstances so that when your paths finally cross, the timing will not be forced but natural, not rushed but perfect, not confusing but unmistakably clear. And you may wonder why certain people had to leave your life recently, or why certain connections suddenly stopped making sense, but what you are experiencing is not loss, it is refinement, because every wrong connection that exits your life creates space for the right connection to enter without competition, without confusion, without delay. And sometimes God removes people not because they were bad but because they were not part of your future assignment, they were part of your preparation season only. And the moment you begin trusting that every closed door is actually guiding you closer to the right one, your heart starts feeling peace again even before the blessing arrives, because faith begins to replace fear, expectation begins to replace doubt, and hope begins to replace uncertainty. And there is a reason you are still holding on to this promise even when others around you stopped believing in divine timing. There is a reason your spirit keeps telling you that something meaningful is approaching even when nothing around you looks different yet. And that reason is simple but powerful: God does not place anticipation inside your heart without also preparing fulfillment for your life, and what is coming toward you is not ordinary, it is intentional, it is protected, it is aligned with your purpose, and when the moment finally arrives you will understand why God asked you to be patient longer than you expected, because the connection He is bringing into your life will not just change your relationship status, it will change your direction, your confidence, your peace, and even your understanding of what love truly feels like when it is guided by Him instead of driven by pressure or fear. And that is why this waiting season is not empty even though it sometimes feels quiet. It is sacred, it is active behind the scenes, and it is moving you closer every single day to the person who is already being prepared to walk beside you at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, at exactly the right time. Folded hand sparkles, because what God is aligning right now cannot be rushed by people and cannot be stopped by circumstances and cannot be replaced by something temporary. And very soon you will look back at this season and realize that the waiting was never wasted. It was the path that led you directly to the promise your heart has been praying for all along. And as you continue moving through this season, something very powerful begins to happen inside you that many people don't notice at first, because while you think you are simply waiting, God is actually teaching your heart how to recognize what is real and what is temporary, what is peace and what is pressure, what is destiny and what is distraction. And this inner clarity is one of the strongest signs that the connection meant for you is getting closer than ever before, because divine timing always begins to reveal itself through quiet confidence long before it becomes visible in your reality. And that quiet confidence you have been feeling lately is not imagination, it is confirmation. It is God gently preparing your spirit so that when the right person finally steps into your life you will not question what you are feeling. You will recognize it instantly as something different from everything you experienced before, because the relationship God prepares for you will not begin with confusion or fear or emotional uncertainty. It will begin with peace, with respect, with alignment, and with a sense of safety that your heart has been searching for longer than you realize. And one of the reasons God allowed certain past connections to end was not to hurt you but to protect you from settling for something that looked right on the outside but was never meant to carry your future on the inside. Because sometimes what feels like rejection is actually redirection, sometimes what feels like delay is actually protection, and sometimes what feels like silence is actually God working behind the scenes in ways that are too detailed and too precise for you to see yet. And even though there were moments when you questioned whether your prayer would ever be answered or whether the person meant for you even existed, your spirit never completely gave up hope. And that hope itself is evidence that God is still writing a story for your life that is not finished yet, because He never places a promise inside your heart without also preparing a path that leads directly toward its fulfillment. And right now that path is being arranged step by step in ways you cannot control but you can trust, because the timing of what is coming into your life is not based on coincidence but on purpose, not based on chance but on alignment, not based on pressure but on divine preparation that has been unfolding long before you even realized it. And there is a reason your heart has been growing stronger recently, even in moments when nothing around you seemed to change. There is a reason your patience has been stretching instead of breaking. There is a reason your faith keeps returning even after disappointment tried to convince you to stop believing. And that reason is because the connection that is approaching your life is not ordinary, and it cannot arrive during an ordinary season of your life. It must arrive at the exact moment when both hearts are ready, when both journeys are aligned, when both spirits are prepared to recognize each other without confusion and without fear. And this is why God has been quietly shaping your mindset, healing your expectations, and strengthening your confidence so that when the right person finally appears you will not carry old fears into a new beginning, but instead you will walk forward with peace and certainty, knowing that what is entering your life now is something He Himself arranged, and very soon you will begin noticing small signs that confirm this shift is already happening around you. Unexpected conversations will start feeling meaningful, certain opportunities will begin opening naturally, and even your intuition will start guiding you toward situations that bring clarity instead of confusion, because divine connections rarely arrive suddenly without preparation. They arrive through a series of moments that gently move two lives closer together until the meeting itself feels natural instead of forced and peaceful, instead of uncertain. And when that moment finally comes, you will understand why every delay you experienced before was necessary, why every closed door protected your future, and why every season of waiting strengthened your heart instead of weakening it. Because the relationship God is bringing into your life is not meant to distract you from your purpose but to walk beside you within your purpose. Not meant to confuse your path but to strengthen your direction, not meant to create pressure but to bring peace that stays even when circumstances change. And when you finally stand inside that promise, you will look back at this season and realize that God was never late, never silent, and never distant. He was simply preparing something far better than anything you could have arranged on your own. And that is why even now you can continue trusting the process you are walking through, because what is ahead of you is not random. It is intentional, it is guided, it is protected, and it is already moving closer to you with every step you take forward in faith, even when you cannot yet see the full picture of what He is preparing for your life.